I have got no problems with the courage of stepping down, either for personal reasons or when you feel you are not comfortable with the system. Step down, do other things. That is one. Two, certainly what happened to Comrade Magufuli was something that was bound to, in one way or another, throw the politics of Tanzania into some,
what we see now.
In some bit of a tilt. And the resignation of the speaker and some other things that we have seen, certain policies in Tanzania now, being readjusted is part of the tilt that I'm talking about.
Okay, well, thank you. Ndugu Wakol, let me come to you. Talk about Ndugu Ndugai, who now ceases, of course, remains a member of parliament, and he threw in the towel to say, no, I am stepping down as Speaker of Parliament. Now he takes that on away from him and just now remains a member of parliament like all the others. Ramifications too at that particular resignation of Ndugai.
Well, first of all, you know, the culture of resigning in Africa is something that we are yet to embrace. Because in Africa,
even when you're supposed to resign and we force you to resign,
yes, because in Africa we take up positions to eat, not to serve. So now people even be asking why. Yeah, but let's also put his resignation in perspective. Yeah, because you see, Honorable Job Ndugai worked well with Magufuli. And actually came in at the right time.
He came in 2015?
Yeah, 2015.
In the chambers,
yes. So that means he has served for 6 years. Yeah, but you see, and when Mama Suluhu came in as the President of the United Republic of Tanzania, there was a group that was bent on blocking her sending to the presidency. Until, of course, when elders like Kikwete, Al-Hassan Mwinyi came in to prevail, they said, look here, let us follow the Constitution. We've had a precedence of following what? The Constitution. And if that particular group that was bent on blocking her has not been comfortable working with her. And I can tell you that this applies to the youth wing of that Umoja wa Vijana of CCM. They were actually, the leadership was against Mama Suluhu Hassan, and you see also they have not had it easy, really trying to readjust themselves. But also, when you look at Ndugai is also somebody who's a little bit a conservative and rigid. Let's look at the elections, during the elections of 2020. You will all know that the opposition almost got nothing. They only got two directly elected members of parliament. So at their constitution, they also have a provision of proportional representation that parties can nominate other members of parliament depending on their performance at presidential level. Now, the members from the opposition, especially from Chadema, that were sworn in by the speaker, the list was not originated by the Secretary General of Chadema. You remember the Secretary General of Chadema said, but look here, I'm seeing Chadema nominees being sworn in and have not written any. Even former speakers like Pius Msekwa, respected people like Pius Msekwa, came up to oppose what Ndugai had done. But Ndugai was adamant.
Yeah, he was very controversial.
Yes, very, very controversial. And actually even
was very
the opposition went to court. Because there was even a situation where one person who was in jail was even released and came to swear in. But now, this is a person who has been in jail. The opposition has been following up his case. How come that his name appeared on the list and is being sworn in? So there are a lot of controversies, and really Tanzanians of goodwill called upon him to reverse it, and he couldn't actually hear any of that.
What does that mean now to succession 2025? Because Mama Samia Suluhu has, of course, publicly let CCM know that 2025 she's coming on. Remember, she's in this term because she's only completing Magufuli's term. If Magufuli was here, of course, he would be running his term until 2025. And you don't even know whether Mama Samia Suluhu was anywhere in the queue of the next leaders of CCM. But because she's tested it, she's been there, she really feels she can actually carry on and continue. Where does that leave Ndugai now? A very influential Chama cha Mapinduzi member and a very controversial person like we all know him. Where does that leave the party? Well, if you're about to see what we saw between Mauritius Kikwete and Edward Lowassa.
Well, what I just want to know is to say is that CCM is a party, a very, very solid party, and I don't think really Ndugai has resigned out of will. The truth is that he has been withdrawn by the party, and he just did it humbly to resign. You know, when you have organized parties, is that a party can, just like we saw in South Africa with the ANC, where they can even recall a whole president. So CCM has recalled him, and the best way is for him to resign. And once you've been recalled by your party, it really becomes very hard for you to think that you can ever stand a chance of being their flag bearer at a national election. That is the truth. That actually with Ndugai, if he doesn't play his cards right, that could be his end. That could actually be the end of his political career in years.
That is also, if I may just chip in something small, that is also the level of political maturity that is expected in political parties.
Any political party.
Because the ability of a political party like ANC to recall a president, to sanction a minister. You are in government, there is a minister who entered a deal with India to buy bicycles. And they were like, but you never brought these issues to the party, we never discussed. How did you enter this deal? So Chama cha Mapinduzi, having the ability, you may not see it in the mainstream newspapers, to go and say, well, speaker, I think here we need to use step aside, and we clean ourselves.
And I think it was the same thing that the same problems that actually Edward Lowassa got with President then Raisi Mauritius Kikwete, and it was but still the party had to come and prevail and say, because the late Dr. John Pombe Magufuli was not anywhere in the queue about that, but the way in which actually the party decided and said it should now be Magufuli that we go with, and of course there he was. Ndugu Mututa, let me hear from you your thoughts about Ndugai's resignation at the Chama cha Mapinduzi and of course Mama Suluhu's presidency.
I think still too early to count him out in the event that he was interested in the future political assignments of the party. And like you said, one of the things about CCM is the placement of its cadres. They definitely have a way, first of all, of disciplining people, the participants in the party, the members, but also placement, recruitment and placement of its cadres.
Identification,
yes. Now, when I look at Ndugai, first of all, he resigns because of one basic reason, that he criticized the government of the funding issue, that the external debt of Tanzania is skyrocketing. As we speak, that IMF has raised the bar of the warning from low to moderate now, which means that the borrowing is continuing. And in one time in Dodoma, I think last week, is when he made a statement saying that one day this country is going to be sold.
It's going to be auctioned.
Yes, it's going to be auctioned.
That's what Ndugai is saying.
Yes. Now, following up on that outburst, I think his position in the parliament was seen as now not tenable. And I'm sure they must have sat down as CCM and said, I think it is now a high time because of your stand on this position, yes, it is better you step away and then another person can come in. And I think that is okay. So that shows that to me is a concerned person, citizen, but also a responsible officer of the party. So I think I can't rule him out of that, but also that he's a respectable person, much Mauritius is controversial. Normally, he does things with the high-handedness, and you know their combination with Magufuli was a good one. Exactly. So, but when it comes to Mama Suluhu, who is known to do things more professionally, but also making sure that the respective persons or agencies that are involved have to have a say in whatever this, which is a good thing.
Won't we see many who were part of the Magufuli administration doing the same as Ndugai here is doing? Won't we see many who will now exit or move away from the scene, who were actually with Magufuli, like you're saying, who clicked with Magufuli and were making very good partnerships in playing?
But the good thing with Magufuli's things that they were not institutionalized. They were more pragmatic as a person, yes.
Nature.
Yes, as a person. But it was not an institutionalized thing. So I don't think it will affect many people, because even those who were there, some of them didn't believe in his way of doing things. So I believe that it could be possible that some people who had now taken on his way of doing things can have problems, either with the party or with the administration, but still the CCM being the party it is likely that, unlikely that we shall have many victims because of the Magufuli legacy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Bill, yes. I've not heard from you about the resignation of Speaker Ndugai in Tanzania. Of course, the Chama cha Mapinduzi party has been there, and Ndugu Rugarama has talked about the maturity. But do you expect actually Chama cha Mapinduzi to have matured up to this time? It's been there, it's been in power, it's actually been there. If it hasn't matured by this time, then they would possibly never mature. But what are your thoughts about the resignation of Job Ndugai?
Yeah, my brother, I want to thank you again. That although we had come for another topic, you brought up this because it's a new development in our neighboring country, Tanzania. The resignation of Job Ndugai is a very good indicator of what has gone wrong within Chama cha Mapinduzi. It's a very good indicator. It shows that there is a bit of what we would call cliques, which was there, or underlying factors which led to the development of cliques within the ruling party, the CCM. It starts with the issue of the Secretary General, former Secretary General, who was not comfortable with Mama Suluhu. And like the name Suluhu suggests, it means peace. What you would call not only peace, but for her she came to bring soberness to what had gone wrong in Tanzania. You remember very well that there were people who were in the administration of Magufuli who encouraged some high-handedness that the former president had. Much as he was bringing development, it was also he also had to bring in some bit of firmness, sometime going outside the constitution, using unconstitutional means. For example, he could go to the hospital, sack people in ministries, just like that. So, but Mama Suluhu had seen some bit of problem with that, and much as she supported the president, she thought she would bring a bit of discipline to the party and a bit of working within the confines of the law. So I would really say that by him coming out openly and criticizing the issue of the debt level of Tanzania, it was just it was just a climax of so many things which had gone wrong. In other words, even her sent to office, they were murmuring about it. They didn't want her to come up. They wanted probably another person, which I think was also wrong, because what was done was the right thing. Just like in Kenya during Kenyatta, when Kenyatta died, Moi had to replace Kenyatta, because that was in the constitution. And this is the time when we know that this politician has matured. By him resigning, he showed political maturity. By CCM putting a bit of pressure on him to make him come out and resign, it showed also that CCM doesn't tolerate indiscipline. And that is what we want in Uganda. In Uganda, these are the issues that we want to discuss as parties. We need what would help us as parties to have discipline within the parties. All the parties have these problems. Discipline is a very important factor in any political party growth. So if you have people where the president is putting up this policy and you try to oppose it or try to ridicule it in public, it doesn't go well with the membership of the party. So I feel it's good that he resigned, and it shows that he's mature politically, and it shows that the party CCM has discipline in its DNA, and shows that it was the right thing to do. The party is going the right direction. And for me, I don't see any problem with Tanzania, because the loans they acquired, they did with the developments. You know, the developments that they've done in Tanzania just during this time of Magufuli. You couldn't expect them to get money from the taxpayers. They had to go for loans to do those developments. So there was no way that you could expect that level of development not to have loans accompanying it. So I feel it was just some underlying factors which were there, as my comrades have said, which led to his resignation, and somehow he was put under pressure within the party.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Now, these are very good thoughts, and of course they now set us to our next topic of discussion, which is talking about the role of opposition parties. Now, we've been discussing Chama cha Mapinduzi in Tanzania, which is the ruling party, but of course in Tanzania we have the Chadema, we have the ACT Wazalendo, we have CUF party, and quite a number of the other political parties, just like we have quite a number here. And of course in all democracies there is one political party at a time that is in power, and other political parties, of course, that in the opposition of that particular party that is in power. Now we'll drift our conversation from Tanzania, and of course we continue looking at the developments as they continue unfolding and of course developing in there in Tanzania to see what happens. This is unprecedented, but of course it's happened. We'll see what happens in Tanzania after Job Ndugai, who resigned yesterday from the speakership of the National Assembly. Now, back to our topic of conversation this morning is we'll talk about the role of opposition parties in Africa. And Ndugu Akola, will start with you. Talk about opposition parties, their status, their role, their contribution, the weaknesses, and all the things. Do we have these to just sanitize our democracies, or we have them for those very reasons that we should be having opposition political parties in any democracy?
Well, thank you, Ndugu Jagenda. The cardinal role of opposition parties in Africa is to come up with alternative policies and strategies for the development of the continent. But at times, maybe unfortunately, most of the time, though, most of the opposition parties in Africa have actually not met that. We realize that in most cases, the opposition has actually behaved like a rebel group within a country. They have acted as a subversive group within a country, and that has always affected their performances. Where opposition parties have really worked as alternative policy and policy providers and alternative leadership providers, well, as time goes by, they've actually succeeded in ascending to power. I'll give an example, a very good example of Ghana, how John Kufuor became the first opposition leader to win an election. is that when he lost twice to Rawlings, he continued talking peace and mobilizing Ghanaians to work together for a common good. That when Rawlings had served his 2 terms, it was now only natural that he would actually come in. And that is how he really ascended onto power. And you know, in Africa, we've also had a tendency of the opposition looking at whoever works with the government as an enemy. But in countries where the opposition leaders, key opposition players have bridged the gap between the opposition and the ruling party, they've tried to lobby people from that side. They eventually won elections. In 2002 in Kenya, that is how NAC won elections. That's how it dislodged KANU, because the likes of Raila Odinga made alliances with KANU, that was with Moi. Then again, when they came out, they had already brought people like Saitoti, Kalonzo Musyoka, Mudavadi on board on this side. So that is how the opposition has actually managed to win elections. The same thing in Zambia in 1991, when actually Chiluba defeated Kenneth Kaunda. That is the same thing, that you find that the opposition has actually, when the opposition presents itself as a peaceful outfit that is there to provide alternative leadership, alternative policy, and alternative strategic direction, then the masses believe in the opposition. Now, but also the other unfortunate also part with the opposition is when they demonize even institutions that are there to protect them. For example, you find that in actually countries where the opposition has failed to have a chance at winning elections is where they demonize the security forces, they demonize government institutions, and perhaps even reach an extent of threatening those who are working there. So it means therefore that they miss the point, and in missing the point they end up also making the population also shun them or fear them. So in short, the opposition in Africa has everything to learn from Ghana, has everything to learn from Malawi, has everything to learn from Zambia, because those are countries where really they even have everything to learn from Kenya. Yes, because there is a book about the late Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, where in after losing the 1992 elections, he really advised his people from Luo Nyanza that if you can ever want to have a realistic chance of ascending to the presidency, you should learn to work with the government.
Okay, yes. Well, thank you so much. Ndugu, I'll get to Ndugu Bill, my brother again. Talk about the opposition, for example. We noticed that many of these political parties are built around individuals. They are built around quite a number of things, individuals. They have quite a number of issues to them. He's just talked about some African countries. When you look at what is happening in Zambia today, seeing President HH now, Hakainde Hichilema, taking over, of course, from Chagwa Lungu Edgar. We saw it with Dr. Lazarus Chakwera also taking it over from Mutharika in Malawi. We saw it in Ghana. In Ghana, I think people vote for the party and are not really the leader, because the party takes 2 terms and another comes, and that's how Mahama lost to who is the president now? That's how Mahama lost to the NPP president, Nana Akufo, and it just keeps bouncing back like that. When you come to Kenya, he's talked about Kenya, but of course the recent Kenya now, 2002, post 2002, you see them changing every other time. You have TNA today, the other day it's Jubilee Coalition, it's Jubilee Party. You have the URP, today it is UDA, the other day it is UDU. They keep changing anything that they feel can actually get there. You've been in power before as Uganda People's Congress, and what is your role as an opposition political party on the continent that even actually develops our democracies as a continent of Africa?
I want to thank you very much, my brother Jagenda. It's true, my brother is right. We have to copy from the countries that he has mentioned, Ghana, Zambia, and our brothers here in Kenya, who have really exhibited maturity in multi-party democracy. Actually, this, what you are talking about, that opposition parties are built around individuals, was well put by Agora portal for parliamentary development. If you go there and you look at what that research talks about, or the investigations that were carried out, the investigation which was carried out about opposition parties in Africa, you will find it clearly that the problem of opposition parties is well articulated and clearly spelled in that investigation. One of the issues that was clearly put forward was the issue, they tried to look at what are the what is the status, first of all, of opposition parties, and what are their contributions, what are their weaknesses. All this was clearly put up by that group, and I want to assure you that the problems of opposition parties is, one, they are very active during elections.
Exactly.
And after
they
elections,
are very active during elections.
After elections, they go to sleep. And this, the other time we discussed about Kenneth, our elder in Kenya, Kenneth Stanley Matiba. You see, in 1992, he mobilized his base in Kikuyus, the word. He mobilized his base and got 1,404,266,000 I'm talking 266 votes. In other words, he got 1.4, which was a very big margin, compared to Moi, who got 1.9. So you see, the range was not very big. The gap was not very big. Then when he came back in 1997, he lost miserably. Why? Because after mobilizing your base, what do you do with the base? Just like now, NUP, Honorable Chagulanyi mobilized his base very well.
Did he even mobilize them, or they drifted from one opposition to the other?
No, he mobilized them.
Okay.
You remember he told them to look for national ID, get the national ID. Yes, to all that was mobilization, my dear. Then after that, what you do with your base in the next election matters a lot in the 5 years. The moment you don't have a program for your base, first of all, remember that they have families to raise, that very base. So you have to engage them in development also. Okay. It's not about politics all the time. You have to engage them. And I remember what President of Tanzania told the police chief of Mara.
Mama Samia, or the
Mama Samia.
Mama Samia.
When he told the police chiefs, he addressed all the police chiefs, he told them that, instructed them that they should concentrate, people should concentrate on development now. Politics is over. So one of the reasons why the 9 members were arrested after the incarceration of the president of Chadema, the leader of Chadema,
Tundu Lissu.
No,
yes.
Yes.
I forget his name.
Yes. So was that they went to organize a conference, which I feel was not also outside the law. Organizing conference can be also part of the program, but for her, she meant that they should concentrate on development. In other words, how do they engage in fighting poverty and all that, but not politics all the time.
Because even the late President Magufuli told them the same thing when he was swearing in. He said, we are done with politics, it is now development. We can't kuwa kwenye siasa forever. Yes, we should now work. Politics is going.
So in other words, learning from what happened to Kenneth Stanley Matiba, how he lost miserably in 97 after 5 years. Although he was also harassed, he was arrested, which he developed later on stroke out of that arrest, which happens in Africa. That's also another thing that this Agora portal for parliamentary development talks about. Some of the challenges opposition parties faced are also contributed by the governing party or the ruling party, because they make you go through hell. And in the 5 years that they make sure that you are really incapacitated.
You're finished.
You are finished completely. So Matiba was arrested, incarcerated. He developed later on stroke. He started living in abject poverty. So by the time elections came in 97, he had no capacity to mobilize again. Remember, he was a minister, he was a chairman of Kenya Football Club, he was a permanent secretary, so he had resources before. But after that election of 92, he became leader of opposition. He couldn't mobilize very well because he didn't have enough resources like he had before, and also he didn't reach out very well to his base. So to us as opposition, what we are saying is that, and this is the discussion we are discussing with the chairman of IPOD, we are saying that, look here, we are not enemies, we are friends. The differences of ideology doesn't mean that we are enemies. We are all working towards building a better future for Uganda. So we need to engage in government programs. You cannot say that, like the parish development model, which the government has put, that the chairman of NRM must sit in that committee. Where do you leave the other parties? And you know that parish development model is one of the development programs of government.
For all Ugandans?
Yes. So what will happen when they give resources to NRM cadres only? That means we are going to leave majority of people behind. We're going to leave Uganda, some other Ugandans behind. So we need to move as a nation, as one nation. Because in this country we rise together and fall together as one nation and one people. So all this, having viewed all this, for us we want to discuss, having studied all these weaknesses of opposition parties for the last over 50 years or 60 years of independence of African states. We are saying we need to have a difference in Uganda. We need to have opposition with a soul. Opposition which knows that after elections, there are supporters of yours who need to engage in development activities, who should be brought into the money economy. And how do we do this? Is to engage in government programs. But we don't want also the ruling party to act like a one-party state, whereby you say that NRM chairpersons of districts will attend the district council. Now, what about the other parties? So these are the challenges we are facing. And we can only speak that through IPOD, an organization which is an umbrella organization for all political parties which have representation in parliament. And that's why I'm so surprised with NUP. I even told them I'm surprised. You should have been the first to embrace this, because you need to be at a table to discuss these things.
Very important. Now that also brings us to ideological orientations and disorientations, because you may have a political party which is simply a sheer vehicle to actually get you to some point and nothing else. Ndugu Mututa, let's get to the conversation and talk about the same now. Look at political parties and their role, just like Ndugu Ebele here from the Uganda People's Congress has elaborated it. Now, many of them, or many of those in the opposition, will actually tell you there is sabotage from the incumbents' policies to fail, to frustrate, and to see that these things don't happen. Secondly, there is a common phrase that a political party is not, it's not a business of trading this or that. It's a party that comes to win a state power. So when they fail to get that state power, it's what Ebele is talking about. Then they resign and wait for the election year. When they know that the elections are 200 days away from here, that's when you now start feeling and hear and seeing all the activism coming up and all the things. What can we do with these political parties that, like he says, you have a political party, and even when you get power or once you are anywhere, you still not to just benefit yourself or to say we achieved this, but we're also helping to develop the country, even when we're not in power.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes that political parties make, both in power and out of power, is the issue of looking only at one end of capturing power. Now, when you go in an election, then you lose that capacity to capture power. You get disintegrated. Sometimes some parties fall off the radar, some disappear. Some take power, but they don't know what to do with that power, because theirs was the main purpose was to take over power. But when you look at the social spectrum, I think it's wider than looking only at taking power or being in power as a political party. But again, sometimes you wonder, we have members of the opposition who go to parliament even when they lose power as a party. Also, we have political parties, opposition political parties that have taken over power in this on this continent. But then you realize that the same claims that they were pursuing when they were out of power are the same things that are being said of them when they finally took over power, which means the issue of political maturity, like we discussed earlier, is a factor, but also the ideological orientation of these political parties is also key. It is not only in Africa that in most cases people think that opposition is being harassed. It also depends on the individuals who wield and have the power. Yesterday, Americans were marking the first anniversary of the attack on the Capitol Hill. And we're talking about the Capitol Hill, the attack which was meant to disorganize what they call certification of the results of a president who had been elected. And the sitting president, according to him, said, no, we cannot have those results certified, because should that happen, then it means we have given up power. Now, so that was an attack on the American democracy, but by who? By a person. So there is one thing of wanting to have power, but also the other thing of the orientation as a political party, as a political system. So I think what we lack here, like somewhere else, is the differentiation of, now that I have lost the campaign to go, I mean the capacity to have myself in power, what do I do? That does not stop you from further organizing the people, like now Tanzanians are saying, now sasa mambo ya politics is stopped. Let's look for development. You cannot fail to organize people for development. I agree that even as you try to do that, sometimes the state may not give you all the leeway to be able to do that. And there are reasons, genuine reasons by the state to do that. Because there is no, to be in power, once you have power, then you need to control it. And there's no way you are going to have everyone do what they want to do when there is a person in power, because he came to power with a program that he has to fulfill in that given time. So what needs to be done is that, okay, one of the things that IPOD is doing should be lauded, because if we are going to sit down and agree that you have taken it, fine, but let's agree on certain aspects, that here let's also do this as you do that. It's possible that at one point when you sit down and agree and you share, because Uganda or any other country is bigger than the political players that are there for that particular time. There will be a time when one is not there, and there will be a time when one must be there. When one is there as a leader, we must respect, and this is also sometimes an issue that political parties don't look at, that there are countries without leadership. And where there are countries without leadership, even your political aspirations cannot be reflected, cannot be aspired. So what we need is to appreciate that. Let's first of all, if one of us has won, is in power, let's appreciate that. Now once we appreciate that, then we also agree with the winner, because it doesn't have to be the winner. But let's have the winner and the losers agreeing on certain specifics, because the country is for all of us. We cannot have it at the same time, but no one has all the ideas to govern. Okay. So if we are not in power, but we can give an alternative to a particular legislation, to a particular policy, like it's talking about the parish model. So let it be, so that there is no this high wall that once we're in power, because there are two things. The government which is in power is going to be credited or discredited by what it is doing.
Okay.
So you have to take responsibility for that accountability, that you have to account to people that while we're in power, we did this, we did this, we did this, fine.
Okay.
But also that those who are outside of power can also take part of that credit. That while someone was in power, we also guided on A, B, C, D, and this is what happened. So for me, I believe in a situation where the two are working together, they are synergizing to come up with some of the solutions that can be taken up at national policies and can happen. And remember, when we were having the other year campaign, when Vestige brought up the issue of abolishing the tax, and it was taken up, and it became a government policy.
Okay.
So, to me, I don't see a problem of working together, but we can only work together when we respect each other. Because if you are an opposition who does not respect the leadership, or if you are a type of leadership that does not respect the other side, then it becomes a problem.
Okay, Ndugu Rugarama, just before I come to you, I am just been told that our other panelist from I think he's in Port Louis now in Mauritius, the Member of Parliament here, Dr. Mahend. Dr. Mahend, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody on the panel, and thank you for getting me on the panel for this excellent meeting that you're having.
Thank you so much, and good morning, Dr. Mahend Gunga Passant. You're in Port Louis now, is that so?
Yes, I am in Portuguese, yes.
Okay.
And I'm a member of the opposition. I'm a member of the Labour Party.
Okay.
And the Labour Party is one of the main parties which is in the opposition in Mauritius.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us this morning. And of course, we're discussing the role of opposition political parties in Africa. Let's hear from you, and let's get the perspective from Mauritius, and especially from the party that you belong to, the Labour Party.
Now, the opposition, I think, is always an alternative. It is always an alternative to the government, to the existing government. We represent in Mauritius the opposition. We represent around 63% of the electorate. In the last election, the government, which is in power, came to power with only 37% of the votes. So the opposition represents the mass, represents the population, and there are a lot of expectations from the population on how the opposition functions inside the parliament and outside the parliament. One of the objectives of the opposition is to make sure that the government proceeds with its mandate in accountability. With accountability, there is transparency. And in Mauritius, we have seen in parliament and outside, the opposition has regularly come up with scandals which are related to the government. All right, recently, because of COVID, we have had a lot of mismanagement of funds. If there is no opposition, then there will be a sort of a dictatorship-like of government. So the opposition in Mauritius is quite strong, although we have limitations inside and outside the parliament to function, to operate. But we have a vibrant opposition, and we concert different parties are in the opposition. We have extra parliamentary members also. So we work together in order to hold the government responsible for its action, to ensure that the government is accountable for every cent that it spends. Though it is not always the case, we have a lot of few politicians who had to resign because of corruption, especially with this government, all right, which believes in money politics, in ethnic politics. So the opposition in Mauritius, as I said, is very strong inside and outside the parliament. And without the opposition, I think democracy will not exist, will not survive. Unfortunately, Mauritius is considered a vibrant, a potent democracy where we parliamentarians of the opposition, we go to parliament whenever there is sitting of the parliament with a series of questions. We question the ministers, we question the prime minister, and we uncover a lot of underdealings, a lot of scandals, so as to enlighten the population about whatever wrong is going on. Apart from that, apart from criticizing, apart from uncovering corruption, the opposition also brings suggestions. The opposition also brings new ideas on how to better manage the country. For example, be it COVID, be it the system of education, be it the health system, be it the economy. We always come forward in order to propose new things, alternatives, so that the government can run the country in a better way. Now, it is up to the government whether it takes into consideration whatever the opposition suggests, whatever the opposition proposes, because we are nation builders. We are patriots. We love our country. We love our nation. So we have our contribution. It is not only the government which is undertaking the construction of the country, is undertaking the development of the country. The opposition also has a seminal role to play, a crucial role to play in this nation building process. And a nation is built on a daily basis with the help of the government and opposition and also extra parliamentarians as well and the members of the public. And we in Mauritius, the opposition, we play our role fully to the best of our abilities.
Dr. Mahend, we've seen this happening on the continent of Africa. We saw in Nigeria when President Buhari now comes from the opposition and of course he takes over power. We've seen it in Zambia, where we now have a former member of the opposition, President Hichilema Hakainde. We saw the same with Dr. Lazarus Chakwera in Malawi. We've seen governments where those in the opposition have now taken over power and of course come there, and not so many things have actually changed, and the questions have always been, you were in the opposition opposing XYOZ's administration, but you now have the government with you and things don't seem to be changing. What do you think we're not doing right as a continent, that we just keep going around the same circles from one leader to the other leader, and things never seem to change for the better of building a vanguard continent of Africa?
There is always this danger. There is always this danger that you are highlighting, that the opposition members, once they accede to power, they repeat the same mistakes, they get into the same corrupt practices as the government, and they start doing exactly the opposite of what they were preaching when they were in opposition. Now, this may not always work in a vibrant democracy where you have a strong press, where you have the virtual media following you. If you do not stick to your word, if you do not do whatever you promised when you were in opposition, you are going to be rejected, one, in public opinion and also in the forthcoming election. This is what is happening today. We have the duty, we have the responsibility to deliver. We have to be different. If we do not deliver on that count, our credibility is going to be tarnished. And in a country like Mauritius, it is important that you have certain measures that you are preaching when you are in opposition. Once you come to power, you ensure that you put them into practice. The current government in Mauritius came to power by militating on the basis of coming forward with transparency. There will be more justice, more equality, there will be no corruption, they are going to provide 24/7 water. But they did not deliver along all these lines. And this is why the public is against them now. So we as opposition, we should know what we are promising, what we are suggesting. We should be realistic, and we should learn from previous mistakes. We cannot repeat the same mistakes that we were condemning when we were in opposition once we come to power. This has to be clear in any democracy of the world, because we are constantly being watched, observed, our action is scrutinized. So in Africa, the different countries you have mentioned, where former opposition members are now in power and they are not living up to the promises, the expectations, definitely the population will turn their back to them.
Okay, just before I come back to studios, one more, and I will return later, but there is an issue of we are normally beginners. When one party is in power, it tends to start afresh. Now, the Labour Party in Mauritius will say, when we come into power, we'll create jobs for the youth, we'll do this, we'll do security, we'll provide this and that and that and that. And when you're given opportunity to lead for maybe 5, 10 or 15 years, another party will also come and say, we will do this and this and this. We don't seem to be having some commonality or a common will or a national agenda that from the Labour Party, if the Labour Party loses power and another party comes on, will continue on this same trajectory and actually build the country of Mauritius. But we come and all of us want to start on a fresh state. We normally talk about American democracies, for example, where it is a banter between the Republicans and the Democrats. But the Republicans have an agenda, the Democrats have their own agenda, and they have the American agenda. That if you become the president of the United States of America, this is where America has to go. The rest of us here will say, we're starting afresh, we'll do this, we'll give you a new Mauritius, we'll give you a new Uganda, we'll give you a new Kenya, we'll give you a new Tanzania, and everything becomes new to us. Why are we there? Is it the problem with the democracy that we're leading, or something needs to be done to our African democracies?
I think the main agenda of the country should not change. Job creation is a national agenda. Okay? Protecting the environment is a national agenda. Providing quality education to children is a national agenda. But the problem is in the approach. The way different parties approach these targets, this is where we have the basic difference. This is where we have to fine-tune things. If we profess the same thing, but our approaches are different, and that is what we have seen. Different parties have different ways of dealing with it. For example, when the Labour Party was in power, it had one approach towards the environment, okay, which we used to call Maurice Il Durable, a sustainable Mauritius. Now, this government that we have today may be talking about environment, but it is destroying nature, destroying environment, destroying the beach, destroying the mountain in order to look for economic development. So, we may be professing the same thing, but the approaches may not be the same thing. Because we may have, in different parties, we have people who have different convictions, different attitudes, different approaches, different background. That is why different parties have different models of development. Although we want development, but the models of development differ. The way we deal at geopolitical level, the type of relationships we tie with different countries of the world in order to pursue our agenda. We should know what is the short and long-term gain of our country. What should be the short and long-term projects that we implement for the welfare of our country. Unfortunately, as you rightly said, once in opposition we have one language, once we come to power, we tend to change, we go upside down. There is a complete overhaul of our approaches, and this is where there is no coherence in whatever we undertake. Now, as I said, today public is judging us. International agencies are judging us. If we are not true to our own selves, if we do not respect whatever we have in our agenda, whatever, then the public is going to reject you because they are going to judge you upon your words today. The public is intelligent. At least in Mauritius, we have an enlightened population, and they are very meticulous, they are very demanding, and they observe whatever you are undertaking. If you go counter, if you go against whatever you have professed, then definitely you are going to have a hard time with the public during the tenure and also during the forthcoming elections.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mahend. We'll return to you. Let me come back to studios here, hear from the gentleman.
Thank you very much.
We'll come back to you, and we thank you so much for your very good submission. You're very clear. You have a good picture, and of course you also have good sound. We can actually hear you very well, and thank you so much for putting up your thoughts. Dr. Mahend is a member of parliament in the opposition in Mauritius, belonging to the Labour Party. Nduguru Garama, let me come back to you here, where we belong to these political parties, in most cases for convenience, that you can't belong to a party because you just tend to have a feeling and say, because I am in this particular region of this country, and this is a stronghold of the Uganda People's Congress, I know that if I don't profess UPC, I will not get an election in this particular area. So you become UPC for purposes of actually finding your way into office. When you are not there and say, I know that this area is dominated by maybe the opposition party X, Y, or Z, you belong to that party not because of the ideals or the ideology, but simply because you know that this is the outfit that gets you there. And we've had problems where people go and they have issues with their own parties, internal conflicts. We've seen the lack of internal democracies and quite a number of things. What do we need to do to strengthen our political parties for posterity?
Thank you so much, Comrade Jagenda. Allow me the latitude of navigating this particular subject this way. That we political analysts have got a tendency of beginning the debate about the role of political opposition political parties. From the post so-called independence of the African states. The latitude I requested you to allow me is that I wish to state that we had opposition even when Africa had its own independence, whether that was at the kingdom level or a chiefdom level. And it is so interesting that even in establishments which clearly we knew, for instance, in Uganda, how a king would come to power, or Ankore, how a king would come to power, we still had altercations that within the hereditary establishments providing political leadership, we had brothers fighting, going against each other, fighting for the throne. That historically, even in Uganda, they will tell you that so and so, Prince so and so was actually supposed to be the king. But for whatever reasons, there were wars, and probably because of these wars, the other emerged victorious, having co-opted some support from the inner circle, and he emerged the king. Up to now, for instance, in Ankore, we have got a prince who is currently, Akoro knows, I think, in Kasese, around there. And he claims he is actually the right king to the Ankore throne. So even before the colonial man came on the African continent, we had, if you like, opposition parties. They were opposition parties, and they were doing the work probably not in a modified manner like we have the mainstream opposition political parties, but they were there, and I thought the public would benefit from getting this information. Now, later, when the colonial man comes onto the African continent, and he does what we all know that he did, and then there was resistance, the internal resistance from some sections of the community on the African continent, and we gain what we call independence from the colonial man. What were the rebel outfits in majority of the countries? What were the rebel outfits that fought for the independence of those states? Later emerged and formed governments in their respective countries. So you will find that from the onset, majority of the independent states of the African continent didn't have what we call opposition political parties, not in the sense like we have now, because whatever came at that time was for purposes of making sure that they get rid of the presence of the colonial master. As we progressed, there started emerging alternative views, and in majority of the cases, the alternative views that emerged and the creation of opposition political parties was unfortunately engineered. It was not organically formed. It was engineered in majority of the cases from the handwork of the colonial master. You'll find that majority of the opposition political parties are actually getting their funding from outside of the country. And I'm not saying that we do not have sincere, ideologically structured political parties which emerge from within the society out of the misrule of some regimes. No, they are there. But I will not go into that because that will take me quite a lot of time. But I want to state that majority of the opposition political parties that we have in majority of the Africa on the African continent have got their agenda. And my colleagues, I must thank them because they were emphasizing the agenda. And probably our brother from Mauritius also knows, I don't think that there is any African state that has been saved, save for what used to happen in Libya. But of course we know, when on the African continent you establish a certain system which is not a system that is blessed by the imperialist, then you will be branded a dictator. That is how we come to have political parties numbering 200 plus in countries like DRC. Now the question is, what are the levels of democracy in DRC simply because we have got 200 plus political parties which are certainly in opposition? One must at any one given time be in leadership. What happened, for instance, when we had at that material time the emergence of Lumumba and under whatever umbrella he was coming, but when he started preaching what didn't please the imperialist Belgium and America, who were interested in exploitation of the natural resources of DRC, what happened to him and what happened to the umbrella under which he was providing leadership? So the argument really, to me, is not the presence of so many opposition political parties, but it is the quality of the opposition and the ability to influence the lives of those people in the various countries. Because I will tell you that I am told, and when you do some bit of searching, that there are so many which political parties which are not talked about. If you go to Britain, it will not be the Conservatives and the Conservatives and
the Labour Party,
the Democrats. I don't know their democratic credentials, because whatever, if they come into government, their foreign policies to the rest of the world do not change. They export their dictatorship to a greater extent. Even internally, their domestic policy, by the way, for instance, what are their policy towards the so-called minorities, the other races who are not necessarily white? So all that, of course, we can critique that. But I want to say that on the African continent, we make a mockery of our democracy, and in majority of the cases, with due respect to the opposition political parties, my brother Abir here knows for a fact that you will find that a good percentage of members in the opposition political parties are actually not there to shape the agenda and better their lives once given the mantle. The problem is, you see, if you fail even to do it when you are still in the opposition, the chances are that even when you are given the baton and the leadership later to become to take on the reins of government, you are not going to be able to do that. The forces which majority of the African governments, political parties which are in leadership, the forces which they face, I want to conclude with this. The Bretton Woods institutions and their policies, the World Bank, the IMF, the policies which they enforce on majority of the African governments, regardless of whatever political party comes into leadership, it is very difficult. We must develop a different formula altogether to combat the unfavorable economic and other related policies emanating from the Bretton Woods institutions in as far as our leadership is concerned. Because regardless whether it will be UPC, whether it will be what, NRM came with very good policies. Some of them are still very good, but I can assure you, where an ordinary eye does not see. And here, just recently we were debating what happened to our butter trade, who sabotaged it. You see, the forces, other than you will see NRM and the leadership in NRM, but I can assure you that their majority, and I'm not saying by saying that, I'm not saying that the sitting governments, including NRM, they don't have their own troubles. They do. Certainly they are there. But what I'm saying is that even when you are well-intentioned, like some of our governments on the African continents are, which the political parties, unfortunately, sometimes conveniently don't say out, you will be frustrated by the global forces, for instance, in the Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank, the lending rates, the ability for you to regulate education is all going to be tampered with by the forces which are not organically from your own local areas. So as a way of concluding on this really, is that I appreciate the role of opposition political parties to the extent that they are organically developed, they emerge from the masses, and that they stick to the script that they want to improve the lives of their own people. But when I realize, and I have realized this, that the majority of the opposition political parties on the African continent is a creation of the imperialists for purposes of perpetuating their own policies and continue to suck the lives out of the African people. We cannot have a government that is not going to be accused of being dictatorial and harassing the opposition parties.
Dr. Mahend, let me come back to Mauritius where you are and continue with this conversation because that's where you are. We talk about opposition political parties and we need to know whether we belong to these parties out of conviction or because of convenience. And number two, we also talk about the parties and the strong men of these parties. In Africa, for example, we know that if somebody belongs to the Republican Party or to the Democrats or the Whig Party in the United States, they are that, whether they are in power or not in power. In Africa, it's a very different story, where you belong to this party today, and because it hasn't given you that, then the other day, you're either forming another opposition party or running away from one party to start another outfit because you feel you're not treated well. We have strong men on the continent, in the opposition, for example. Go to Kenya, and there are these opposition persons or figures that you've seen from the times of 1997, 2002, all the way. When you talk about opposition politics in Kenya, there are faces that will come to you. They've been here with us. Go elsewhere, where we think there is some entitlement to these opposition leaders. Is it out of conviction or convenience? And are we using these parties to grow leaders or to just propel our own interests? Dr. Mahend, you've switched yourself off, but you're back. Answer my questions.
Now, it all depends upon individuals. There are some people who have a strong conviction, they adhere to their party's philosophy, they respect the leader that runs the party. But we also have some people who keep migrating from one party to the other because they do not have strong convictions. I believe that they have another agenda, which is self-satisfying agenda. It is a personal thing, personal quest. Now, I can answer for myself. I am a member of the Labour Party by conviction. No matter what happens, I am going to stick to my party because I believe in the philosophy, in the ideals, in the history, and in the future of that party. Whether it is in opposition or not, I am always inclined to follow the values of the Labour Party. Now, this much said, I also concur that in Mauritius, irrespective of parties, we have a handful of people who, without any hesitation, will keep on migrating, moving, relinquishing the party which they follow in order to come to power, in order to get a post for financial reasons, and also in order to accede to a post. So there are people who change over time. They reject, they relinquish the values they were professing in the past. Unlike in some other countries where a person will always adhere to, stick to one party that they are following. And as I said, I am happy I belong to a great party, the Labour Party, which is there for years now, all right, which has been at the helm of the country, and most of the achievements of this country are credited to the Labour Party. We are in opposition today, and we hope soon we will come to power in order to run the affairs of the country. Now, this does not mean that people who belong to Labour Party will not quit, will not leave Labour Party. And this does not mean that people who are currently in other parties may not join the Labour Party. This is the dynamics of politics sometimes. Some people are always moving from one party to the other. We have, unfortunately or fortunately, we have such people in a democracy. They have the freedom of choice. They can today be in a party and tomorrow join another party. This is acceptable in a country like Mauritius. but it's all a question of individual conviction. As I said, I maintain personally, from a personal perspective, I belong to the Labour Party. I stick to the Labour Party, come what may come. In thin and thick, I am a Labourite, and I will remain a Labourite.
Well, thank you so much. We'll come back to you when we're concluding. And Ndugwe Bill, Honorable, we have a few minutes, just about 17 minutes to conclude this conversation here today. Let's start now getting into a we will stop it. Look at the parties. Yes, we have political parties, of course, especially in the opposition, that are weak parties with weak connections. They have internal issues, inter-party wrangles in there, and these are some of the things that we can't ably manage. Now, to benefit Dr. Mahend in Mauritius, let me confess and let him know this, that it happens in Uganda, for example, where every party is mad with what I call the mystery of two. You are in the Uganda People's Congress, which has a leader here, and another person claims I'm also the leader here. You get to the FDC that says, I am the leader here, and another says, I am the leader in Katonga. There is a leader in Najanankumbi and a leader in Katonga. You have the Democratic Party that says, I am a leader here, and this person says, we have all these issues in our political parties. Very weak that somebody comes up and says, I am not taking the party position, and we can't do anything to them. They go and campaign for another candidate, as opposed to their own candidate in that particular election or so, and we can't do anything to them. We'll simply just wish it away. What needs to be done to make sure that we strengthen these parties and they actually really become parties that we want them to be?
Actually, these are issues that we are going to discuss with the chairman of IPOD.
When you get to IPOD?
Yes, this is one of the issues that we've raised, issues of discipline within parties. Because if you get back to the other research I told you about Agora, portal on the parliamentary development, you'll get to what you're saying, that one of the problems of the political parties in Africa, opposition parties in Africa, is that the inter and intra conflicts. It has led them not to have cohesion, and without cohesion you cannot really campaign and win elections against an incumbent, because already you have first of all, internal weakness. So these are issues that we need to address, and we have called it discipline within parties. Even NRM, you've talked about all opposition parties, even NRM has a problem. They have also discipline. Yes, there's a problem of discipline within NRM. So it has not spared any party. So we are going to discuss as political parties with members with representation in parliament to ensure we come up with a solution to this. And me, I think, as I told you last time, once you don't have a proper ideology within a political party, you are born to have this problem. And as the other scholar I told you about put it rightly, that any political party without ideology, once it comes to power, it becomes a totalitarian administration or authoritarian administration, because everything starts with the leader and ends with the leader. For example, today Honorable Kyagulanyi is called father.
Principal.
Father. When they say father, you'll ask, which father? Is it a reverend father? They're talking about him.
Father.
Yeah, but what about if he comes to power now?
Then
because
father.
The members are right to adore him, but they need to be well grounded in ideological orientation. They need to be taken through an ideological orientation. Yes, they need to have an ideology. And I'm not saying no, it's all a problem with NUP. It's also a problem with UPC. It's a problem with FDC. It's a problem with DP, NRM. All parties, I'm telling you, in Uganda have this problem. Some of them have ideologies, but members, majority of the members are not ideologically trained.
Okay.
So we need ideological training, and all this comes with us agreeing as political parties with representation in parliament to say that it is true. You first acknowledge the problem, that we have this problem. And once we acknowledge that there is a deficit there, then we now start to get a solution. And that solution would help us to go a long way in addressing some of the challenges of the problems that we are facing as a country. So, because these problems emanate from political parties, now they go to government because somebody is a minister, he will look down onto the director in a political party headquarters because he feels he's bigger than the director. I want to tell you, in 1980 here to 85, Uganda House, the headquarters of the party, was very powerful because that's where every policy was first. Yes, policies were handled from there, then brought to the parliamentary group, then brought to government, and that's how parties should operate. But not making political party headquarters smaller than the government. So that goes back to discipline. So we need to also look at the challenges that we face, which is a reality. I know people don't want to talk about it. The same group, Agora, investigated and found out that the problems of opposition parties is inadequate funding. And this one plays in the hands, it's promoted by the ruling party. It doesn't want to release funds. It's not only in Uganda, in Kenya actually it's worse. We found out that only 3% of the GDP is given to political parties with representation in Kenya. But worse still, only 2 parties have been getting money out of all those many parties which even have representation in parliament. And it doesn't come often. It may come this year, then again next year they may not put it in the budget. So the whole thing is
insufficient.
The problem it's the problem of political parties in opposition in Africa. One of the problems and main challenges, the major challenge is inadequate funding. So we need to get a formula in which in Africa,
and somebody will say, why don't you generate your own funds as a political party as opposed to waiting
actually
for
UPC has the best formula, because for us, you know, we have our properties.
You have property,
and we are developing programs for agriculture, promoting actually having a Department of Agriculture to do farming, modern farming. We are trying to recover our properties which are lost. Some of them are in the hands of some mafias. We have to get them back. Yes. So, but other parties also should follow suit. What I'm trying to put forward is that the only limitation we have is that, you know, there was a cap onto external funding, of which I also believe that we don't need foreign funders really, because they come up with strings attached to it.
And several conditions.
They will tell you to promote maybe gay marriage.
Do this and do that.
Or
things that you don't believe in as a party.
Go in the streets and burn tires, cause chaos. Like we were told that there is some gentleman, I don't want to mention a name, with a new party which is one of the major opposition parties. He told them that kill about 10,000 people in Kampala street. Once you kill them, take them to the street, let them demonstrate violently, so that the security forces shoot them. Once 10,000 people die in Kampala road, it gives us cause. Yes, it will cause to come in. Now you think about that mother who has lost his son. So that's why I don't believe in foreign funding. And for us, we are saying that we have enough to share as political parties from the taxpayers. So we only need the equity, or we need to share it equally. So those are the issues that we need to agree on. But some people are saying we don't need funding from government. That's not government money. It's our own money that we pay taxes.
That's also ideology. If somebody says we don't need government money,
why do you get somebody's taxpayers' money and you are not ashamed? And you are ashamed of getting your own money, which you pay here. So we think all of us as political players in opposition, we should agree that it's a problem because it has been identified by a well-researched platform, and they have researched about it. It's a problem and we should accept it. So with all this, what I'm saying by and large, we need discipline among the political class, and we need discipline among the political players to know that much as we have different political ideologies, we have a country to rebuild. We have a country that we need to save for the future generation.
Very good.
Better than we found it.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much. We have only 8 minutes. Akol, let's share the 8 minutes amongst ourselves. 1 minute each of us, and ask Dr. Mahend also to just use 1 minute to say goodbye to us, and we end our first edition of the Pan-African Friday this year. Finally from you.
Well, finally, I must say that opposition parties in Africa should really build capacity. Building capacity in terms of understanding the strategic direction of Africa, the strategic direction of their particular countries, and what their parties are going to do. Because now, parties that are only formed with one ideology or perhaps one agenda of forming government, even when they get into government, they collapse, like NAC in Kenya. NAC in Kenya was solely formed to dislodge KANU, and after dislodging KANU, they fell apart.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Ndugu Mtuta, in 1.5 minutes.
The issue of funding, I think, should be a problem, but shouldn't also be a problem, because by the mere fact that you become a political party, you should be able to have enough money. Because then it means if you cannot afford funding as a political party, you are targeting government. When you get into government, you hear of these problems of diversion of funds to be able to run your activities. But also at the same time, when you look at it, most of the political parties in Africa, I think, hinging on NGOs.
Exactly. I didn't get time enough to talk about civil society organizations, because they also fused into opposition politics in a way that wherever you see the civil society organizations, they are construed to actually either be leaning to the opposition or being part of the opposition, or even fostering and mooting.
Yeah, because when you trace back the funders, where they come from, there must be a political party behind any of these given organizations.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Ndugu Mtuta. You brought in something very important, but we'll talk about it in the future. Ndugu Rugarama, in just 1 minute before we ask Dr. Mahend to also conclude and we get out of studios.
I am absolutely for the concept of political parties. I am for it, and I have got no problems with having political parties, only that they must appreciate what it means to be a political party, and as long as they are organically formed for purposes of addressing the interests of their own people. But as long as we have got political parties on the African continent which are a creature of the imperialists, we shall always have the problems not just getting solved, but increasing, and that will also be an indicator that the African democracy is going on a decline.
Okay. Dr. Mahend, back to in Port Louis in Mauritius. Finally from you in 1.5 minutes.
I think the opposition is the government in the waiting, and it should have a preparedness plan already in case it comes to power, and it should have a plan which is realistic, which is feasible, and which is vetted by the public, which is going to work in the interest of the public. As you said, many opposition parties, once coming to power, they change completely their ideologies, their policies, their philosophies, and that is why the public tends to turn their back to them. So the opposition, I think, is very important in a democracy, and that is why it has to be credible at all points in time. And I thank all of you for giving me this opportunity to participate in this lively discussion held by you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Mahend in Mauritius. He's a member of parliament representing the Labour Party in Mauritius. We thank you so much, Dr. Mahend, for having allowed to join us here, and of course for giving us those very good thoughts about that. Back home here in studios, you had with me Ndugu Rugarama. He's the chairman of the Pan-African Movement Uganda chapter. Thank you so much. I had Ndugu Ebel, Alfred Ebel, the Secretary General of the Uganda People's Congress. Congress. We don't normally call it the Uganda People's Congress Party. It is called the Uganda People's Congress. It's the UPC. Some people call it the UPC Party, just like people say the DRC Congo. It can't be the DRC Congo. It is the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, or DR Congo. Thank you very much, Ndugu Ebel from the Uganda People's Congress. Thank you, Ndugu Akola Mazima, and of course my comrade here, Mututa. We'll fight him. Finally, you know, we'll talk about the legislative agenda of the opposition in Parliament, and it just amazes that as the NRM, a ruling party, it talks about securing the future, and of course with their policies, the manifesto, etc. The opposition in Parliament, through the leader of opposition from the National Unity Platform of so, came up with what they call the legislative agenda. It's amazing that when you talk to members of the National Unity Platform, do not know about that legislative agenda. When you talk to those in the UPC, when you talk to those in the Democratic Party, when you talk to those others in the other parties, actually do not know what is embedded in this legislative agenda.
Although I was there for the launch.
And yes.
I was there for the launch. Actually, the agenda is good.
The agenda is good.
What we need to know as a country that the agenda which was brought forward by the leader of opposition is good. All we need is the support of the majority members of NRM, who are the majority members of Parliament.
And the leader of opposition who brought the agenda does not want to come to IPOD again.
That is another problem.
Exactly. We're part of this agenda.
It's a challenge.
But if he's talking, I know time is good. If he's talking over the members of NRM to support it, if the members of NUP don't know it,
yes, of course, that's the dilemma. That is the dilemma. Now, he's UPC. He knows it because it's not an NUP manifesto.
Exactly.
It is an opposition legislative agenda. So he knows about it. Now, if members of the NUP do not know about it, then I think that's a crisis. That's a problem.
Yeah.
Where it is. So, but thank you so much, gentlemen, for being allowed to be here for our first edition of the Pan-African Friday. Thank you so much to our producer, Farouk Kurwama, and of course, all the team that you work with to make this possible. We thank you for God and my country. Stay blessed. Let's remember that we are in an economy and a country that is opening up fully to social life, business life, etc. But we need to take personal responsibility in managing COVID-19. Let's get vaccinated, and let's also observe the other SOPs as we do all this work. For God and my country, stay blessed. Good morning and bye-bye. Thank you very much.